Welcome to the SBI Podcast, offering CEOs, sales and marketing leaders ideas to make the number.
Welcome to the SBI Podcast, a weekly broadcast dedicated to helping you make your number by getting your peers to share with you how they make theirs. Today's topic is sales organizational design. My name is Greg Alexander, CEO of SBI, and I am your host. Joining me today is Dave Longaker. Dave, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Hi, I'm Chief Revenue Officer at Rovi Corporation, and we're a leading technology supplier in the entertainment industry. Our focus is helping people discover the content they're looking for and helping content owners and advertisers find the audiences they're looking for.
Okay, very good. And Dave, as I know your company, and this is probably a woefully inadequate understanding of what your company does, but for the benefit of the audience, if I'm on my TV remote control and I'm flipping through my guide and I'm looking for television shows, I understand that that's the type of technology you provide. Is that correct?
That's one of them for sure. So if you are flipping through channels and looking for TV shows or on-demand content or DVR content, very likely you're using a Rovi guide product or a guide that was created with our technology.
Okay.
In addition to the guide products themselves, we make the underlying technology for search and recommendation, and including advanced search and recommendation and conversation services, which today are a very important component of any guide product. In addition to that, we're one of the leading suppliers of metadata to the entertainment industry, covering video and music as well as books. And lastly, we're also in the analytics business, helping again the network providers, the content owners, analyze big data to discover their audiences.
Okay, great. It's helpful for our audience to try to relate to who you are and what you do, and that was a really good description, so I appreciate you walking us through that. All right, as I mentioned at the top of the show, we're going to talk about sales organizational design. Why are we talking about this today? Well, when this show airs, it's going to be mid to late summer. And what that means for a lot of companies that are on a calendar fiscal year is that they're in their annual planning process. And every time they hit their annual planning process, they ask themselves a fundamental question, which is, do we have the right org structure? Do we need a new org chart? Now, as it relates to sales, this is a huge question to get correctly. And what I hope to do here today, with Dave's help, is we're going to play the role of the consultant and the practitioner. And what I mean by that is that I'm going to ask some methodology-styled questions, and Dave's going to answer them. And you as a listener, what you should get out of this is you should say, okay, those questions that Greg asked, maybe those are questions I need to ask myself. And then when Dave answers those, it might help you think through how you might answer those questions for yourself, what a good answer might look like, and how you might interpret these methodology questions. So that's what we're after today. That's a definition of success. So with that as an understanding, let me jump into it. Okay, so Dave, in our view, what we've seen is that there's 7 B2B sales organizational models out there today. Let me briefly describe those to you, and then I'd like you to share with the audience, do you use any of these, all of these, some of these, and why you chose each one. So the first is stratification. So think of this as a pyramid where you have your key accounts at the top, kind of your bread and butter accounts in the middle, and your small business customers at the bottom. Second model is the hunter-farmer model. So hunters get new business, farmers farm the existing accounts. Third is a product specialist sales force. So you have products that might be complex, and the end customer values the sales rep's knowledge, product knowledge, so you go to the market on product specialist. Next, you have industry specialist. So maybe you have an insurance vertical because it's important for the salesperson to understand the problems of an industry at a granular level to be successful. Then you have a role specialist. This is fairly new, but maybe you have somebody who sells to the CEO, somebody who sells to the CIO, somebody who sells to the CFO, so you specialize on role. The benefit of that is you get to know the persona really, really well, so you can be very effective and relevant to that person. Then, of course, you have geographic, and this is, by zip code or by state or what have you, where one salesperson sells all things to all customers. That's a very traditional model, still in effect in a lot of places today. And then lastly, you have a hybrid, which is some combination of two or more of those items, which is also very common these days. So that's kind of the known universe. So Dave, now that I've walked you through that, help the audience understand what your sales organizational model looks like, and most importantly, why you chose the one you chose.
Sure. Well, the short answer is for us, hybrid model works best. But before I get into why, let me give you a little background on us and our sales transformation. So Rovi as a company has been going through a pretty dramatic shift over the last several years, beginning with investments in a number of new products that I walked through earlier on the podcast. We've acquired companies in the search and recommendations space, in the next generation connected guides space. We've partnered with technology companies that take us into the over-the-top space. So the net of that is we're dramatically expanding our customer base beyond our classic customers in the North American service provider space and the international consumer electronics space. So we have a much larger customer base to address. We also have a much expanded product offering to ramp, and many of them are newer products that are just in their first year or two of growing. So that, in some ways, influences the org structure that works well for us. Mm-hmm. On top of that, we chose a little over a year ago to move from what I describe as more siloed sales teams that were focused on specific products to a unified sales team that's selling the entire Rovi portfolio. Mm-hmm. So as part of that transition, we really found that a hybrid of a geographic model along with some industry specialty and some role specialty works really well for us. And at the end of the day, what we're really trying to get at is making sure that we put a sales team in the field that deeply understands the customers they're calling on, has broad relationships in that customer base, and is able to expose them to the value of the entire Rovi portfolio. Yep. So at a high level, the way we've organized is geographically by major region, and then within that region by specific customer segments that we're targeting. And that's in recognition that calling on a consumer electronics company is a different kind of skill set and a different kind of experience and knowledge base that you want to bring than calling on a service provider, mm-hmm. As an example. Mm-hmm. So again, this really allows us to focus in on our key customer segments, which for us are service providers, the key TV networks and broadcasters, internet and over-the-top entertainment providers, and consumer electronics manufacturers. So within any geographical region, you'll typically see us focusing dedicated sales teams on each of these areas. Mm. Now, within that model, we also need some product specialists to make sure that we've got the right degree of deeper technical support out in the field for our customers. So we have a few positions in the sales team that are oriented towards product specialty within each geographical region and supporting each of those vertical market segments I mentioned. And that allows us to really have deeper subject matter expertise on our discovery business, our metadata business, our analytics business, and our technology licensing business. So those are 4 areas that we have some subject matter expertise within each region and within each customer segment base.
Fantastic. So we've got a company that is rapidly expanding its customer base, new products, acquisitions, new markets, new partners, etc. And as a result of that, it drove the need for a new sales model. So we go from a siloed sales model to a unified sales model. And we've selected geographic region as kind of an umbrella, and then within each of those geos, some real hyper specialization around certain customer segments, and I'm sure there's a lot of business logic behind that. So that's a great example. So what you should be asking yourself right now, audience members, is, do I have a rapidly expanding customer base? Am I going after new markets with new products? Am I making some acquisitions? Am I competing with new people? And if so, maybe it's time to reconsider my sales org model. Okay, that takes me to my second question, which is, so now you have this model, as you just explained it to us, and on an org chart you have roles, job roles. So you mentioned some, product specialist, maybe some industry verticalization, et cetera. So the question that I would have for you is finding the balance between too little sophistication and too much sophistication. You know, normally the simplest solution is the best, but you have a highly specialized sales force here, so that tells me that you've got all kinds of job roles on the org chart. So is that true, I guess is the first question. Give me some examples of what those might be, and why, what was the business case for the added complexity of this degree of specialization?
Yeah, so I hope I didn't do a bad job of describing it first, because I think we do try to look at it pretty simplistically, and I think we've tried to keep the roles very simple, so the accountability is very clear.
Okay.
So at a basic level, the roles that we need in our organization are account management, which includes the frontline client directors and their management hierarchy. And we try to keep that fairly thin as well. Technical sales, which brings the product-specific expertise in each of the business group areas that I mentioned. And then sales operations to really provide support for those functions. In terms of customer-facing roles, it's really a salesperson partnered with a technical salesperson or more than one engaging any given customer.
Okay.
And so pretty simple model. Within the sales organization, we may have a group of salespeople that are in a specific industry segment, but the role and responsibilities really aren't very different whether you're a service provider, client director, or a networks and advertising client director.
Okay.
That's an example.
Got it. Yeah, that is, I misunderstood you when you explained it earlier. That is simpler than I thought. And you're right, the responsibilities and accountabilities are the same. You just might be calling on a different customer segment, and you might have a different background. You know, your profile of yourself as an individual sales rep might be differently. Okay, very good. All right, let me go to the next question. So now you know what your org model is. You know the types of roles that you need in your org chart. So now you got to figure out capacity. So how much selling capacity do I need? If I have too much, I have negative or poor cash flow, poor profits. If I have too little, I'm leaving some revenue growth opportunity on the table. And finding this equilibrium point between having too much and too little sales capacity is really important. So how do you size your sales team, Dave?
Yeah, well, not to be coy, but carefully would be my first reaction to that question. And, really for us, given the transformation in our product portfolio, and in particular the plethora of new products that we're focused on bringing to market and growing and expanding country by country. And given the relative newness of transforming into a unified sales structure, as well as the newness of some of the sales employees themselves, we've had quite a bit of new blood enter the company over the course of the past year. The exact metric is the number behind the metric is one that we're still sort of working our way towards. Mm-hmm. So we inherited a certain structure when we first moved to the unified sales model, and the goal is, of course, to continue fine-tuning that until you have enough experience with the new model we're implementing to really know exactly how to scale it. So it's a balance that we revisit. Personally, I revisit it almost every month of, do we have the right people in each role, in each geography to support the customers that we're engaging appropriately and yet not be overspending. Yep. So I can't cite an exact metric for you right now because this is something, like I say, we're kind of trying to feel our way through. One of the things that we've focused a lot of time on is developing the right metrics that we want to track to determine that scaling, and then the right systems to allow us to track those metrics easily. Mm-hmm. So it's one of the key roles of our sales operations team, is to make sure that the metrics that we need to understand sales productivity are easy to gather and something that we can look at in a frequent basis to sort out how to think about the continued evolution of the organization.
Okay, very good. For the audience, if you're somebody like Dave that's going through this and you're in the middle of a transformation, there are lots of kind of methodologies out there in terms of determining the right size of your sales force. And Dave, I'll send some of these to you after the show. Google things like the pipeline method, the activity-based method, the conversion rate method. These are all quantitative methods that, when used together, typically produce a pretty accurate result. When used by themselves, maybe not so much. But with all the data that we're swimming in today and the ability of these analytics tools that exist, it's becoming increasingly easier. Not that it's easy, but it's getting easier to do this. So for the audience, just Google some of those terms and hopefully you'll find what you need. All right, let me go to the next
Greg,
question.
not to interrupt you, but I'll give SBI a little bit of a plug here. Certainly that's an area that has been some of our most interesting discussion with SBI and Matt Sharers in particular. So
okay, great.
I agree with the importance of it. And I'd mention one more thing is just that, of course, those metrics are something that we're going to try and really fine-tune on a region-by-region basis, if not country-by-country basis, and also in a customer segment-by-customer segment basis.
Yeah.
And ultimately probably even in split between scale of customer between some of our largest accounts and our smallest accounts.
Yeah.
So.
And then it gets even more complicated when you think about it if you want to do it by product, which sometimes people do, and then if you want to do it by sales channel. So it's one thing to say, how many salespeople do I need? How many of them are inside salespeople? How many of them are technical salespeople, et cetera, et cetera. So it can get complicated quickly. The point I'm just trying to make is that there is a science to it. It is really important, and take the time to think through it. All right, let me move to my last question of this segment, just to keep the show moving along here, is once you've figured out your capacity, now you got to deploy it against the market opportunity correctly. So hypothetically, in a perfect world, which I know none of us live in, is you want your best salespeople deployed against the accounts that have the most potential. You want to make sure that the channel preferences of your customers, how they want to buy and engage with you, is how you're selling to them. You want to match that channel to those buyer preferences. So, Dave, I'm sure you've thought about this, is making sure that your best people are on the accounts with the most potential. As you're going through your sales transformation here at Rovi, how have you done that? Have you gotten into that much yet?
Yeah, so of course we have, and this is always part of not overspending on your sales force, is making sure that the scarce resources that you do have are focused on the most important opportunities and customer relationships. So the way I've approached it has been to start by making sure you have the best leaders in place. And as I mentioned, our top-level organization is by geography. And so, for me, ensuring that throughout the organization our best resources are working on our best opportunities is really the responsibility of the sales leadership in each of our major groups. And so by having the right leaders in place, I feel a lot better about making the right real-time decisions about deployment of that capacity and where it's focused.
Yep. And your responsibility is global, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, the emphasis on having the right leadership is so essential because people are running large geographic regions for you, and if they're not the right people, they're going to make the wrong decisions, and that's going to hurt you ultimately in the end. So I totally agree with you on that getting the right leaders in place is the most important thing. And then hopefully there's some, I don't want to say standard, but maybe some guidelines that these regional leaders can follow in terms of doing some of this work, which allows for some standardization, but not so much that they're not allowed to have the flexibility and localize their own business operation. Okay.
That's right. And I guess I'd mention one more thing that we saw a need to put in place to aid with that a bit is more and more we're seeing our biggest opportunities being with multinational operators and also global consumer electronics manufacturers. And so the question of optimizing the deployment of your capacity isn't just one that's contained within any given region. It's one that becomes global allocation across several regions. And so we have created a global accounts team to help, again, ensure that same optimization of resources across regions for those customers that span multiple regions for us.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I can see how critical that is for you. You want those customers to have a coordinated effort from you and not get frustrated because when they talk to somebody in North America, it's, they hear something different than when they talk to somebody in Asia, as an example. That's a great point. And global accounts is another organizational consideration. So that's consistent with today's topic of sales organizational design. All right, we're going to take a quick break. But before we do, I want to let our audience know that we just released our annual workbook for 2017. We've been doing this now for 10 years. It's titled How to Make Your Number in 2017. And it was written for a very particular audience. It was written for executive leadership teams inside of companies with aggressive revenue growth targets. Not modest growth lifts, but those that have a really big number to hit, who have a lot on the line. So if they hit it, there's a lot to gain, and if they miss it, there's a lot to lose. And most importantly, who don't have a lot of time to waste. They want to grab these emerging best practices and get them implemented into their business as quickly as possible. And when you listen to this podcast, it'll be mid-summer-ish, and most companies that are on a calendar fiscal year will be in their planning cycle for 2017, so that's why we release it at that time. You're going to want to read it. It will help you make your number next year. So to get a copy of it, go to sbi.tips/2017 workbook. You're listening to the SBI podcast. We'll be back in a second.
Do you have too many things to do and not enough time to do them? Is finding time to learn best practices almost impossible? The SBI podcast is your solution. Turn time spent exercising, commuting, and traveling into productive learning time with a subscription to the SBI podcast. SBI podcast listeners get unique insight into real-world sales and marketing issues through interviews with your industry peers every week. Find us on iTunes by searching for Sales Benchmark Index Podcast and subscribe today.
Okay, welcome back. You're listening to the SBI podcast. I'm Greg Alexander, your host, and today my guest is Dave Longaker, the Chief Revenue Officer of Rovi. And today we're talking about sales organizational design. So let's jump back into the questions. And in this segment, Dave, I'm just going to ask you two questions, because we covered a lot in the first segment. My first question is, through which sales channels do your buyers want to engage your sales team?
This is this is a great topic for us, and an area that's gotten, I'll call it a renewed focus from us as we've gone through our sales organization and our company transformation over the course of the past year or so. And where we're focused today is working with three different types of partners that are all, of course, driven by how our customers prefer to engage us. So aside from our direct sales, we work in partnership with consumer electronics manufacturers, and that's a traditional area of partnership for Rovi. And by this I mean the set-top box and home gateway vendors primarily. But that's also an expanding list that may take us into more partnering sort of relationships with the TV manufacturers as well. So that's one area. A second area is local specialists who offer a similar product that may complement or enhance our offerings in that local market. And by local market, I'm usually talking about a specific country. So when you're talking about entertainment discovery, content discovery, localization of that discovery is so important that at times we'll find partnerships with local vendors combined with our global capabilities are a great combination, not just in delivering the right product and solution to the customers, but also in delivering the right sort of localized support. And so country by country, we'll look for partnerships that make sense, that could be opportunity-driven, could be customer-driven, or could be overall market-driven. A last area that we're focusing more on today is the system integrators.
Yeah.
And so, there are some very large companies in the world who do system integration for the service providers in the world, the MSOs and the various types of pay TV providers. And those are natural fits for us as they look to bring a complete end-to-end solution to our shared customer base. And we're seeing lots of opportunities where our end customers are looking for a single system integrator to bring an entire next generation system together for them, and so they're a natural channel for us.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the three types to answer your question.
Yeah, a great answer. So let me do a quick follow-up on that. So given that you've got these three channels, which are the ways that your customers want to buy or engage, which is the question that I asked, do you have a separate sales team called a channel team that sells into these, or does your direct sales force also have responsibilities for these three alternative channels?
Yeah, so today our direct sales teams in each region have responsibility for this, and within each region you'll see that we've got usually a salesperson or two focused on the channel partnerships within the region. Over time, this is something that I'm certainly taking a close look at, and as our business evolves, particularly as our channel partner business evolves with the new products that I described, it's something that easily could become another global group that focuses on support of these channels as our business through them ramps. Yeah. But given the newness of some of our relationships, which is a result of the newness of some of our products, this is still an evolving model for us.
Okay, very good. All right, my next question, which is really around the level of sales specialization. So let me kind of frame this up, and I'll try to do my best not to overcomplicate this. But when I'm working with my clients, particularly when the CFO is involved, and there's some arguments around the cost of sale, and we're calculating customer acquisition costs and comparing that to customer lifetime value, we often get into an argument about specialization and that it's expensive, whether it's vertical specialization, product specialization, you name it. And ultimately the CFO says, hey, are the buyers willing to pay for this? The customers that we sell to. If we put a higher sales cost model, which with all of this level of expertise, that takes our cost of sale up, which needs to be factored into the purchase price of our offering, can we pass that off to the customer? And if we can, great. If not, then usually there's no support for it. So when you looked at this specialization and the sophistication of what you offer, especially with all of these new different products, did you have to go through a economic analysis in terms of what the buyer is willing to pay for, or was this more of a, if we don't do it, they're not going to buy anything kind of decision?
Sure. So I'll try and keep my answer not too complex, but of course we're always looking at the cost of whatever sales model and sales organization we've put in place. I don't think I've ever looked at it from the perspective of what degree of specialization are our customers willing to pay for. I think we look at it as what degree of specialization and relationship do our customers need, and do we need in order to win business? Mm-hmm. And then how do we make that work in our business model? Yep. I think when it's properly designed, we can find ways to implement specialization such that it's not much more expensive, if more expensive at all, than a more generalist model. Right. So if you're looking at, you can look to support the same amount of business with roughly the same number of people. Just a question of how do you organize them and how do you assign account responsibilities. So at times where that can impact cost is more in the area of travel than it is in the area of staffing itself. Yeah. So again, we look at it as how do we establish the degree of specialization that really allows us to have to make our customer relationships a competitive advantage for us. so that we understand their business enough and their industry enough, or their segment enough, that we can really bring them great experiences and best thoughts and best practices from throughout the industry, and that we really understand their company well enough to know how to maximize the value that Rovi is bringing to them.
Yep.
So that's really how we look at it, and then we build our business around that. And I don't think we've found that the degree of specialization that helps us win and that gets our customers what they need has been more expensive than other models.
Okay, very good.
In fact, it drives better results.
Yep. All right, so for those that are listening or watching, if you're in an argument with your CFO, which I hope you're not, but if you are, and you're debating on is specialization worth it, and maybe you're not fortunate enough to be in a situation that Dave is in where specialization doesn't equal any extra cost or anything worth talking about. If it does equal extra cost for you, there's two ways to have that conversation. Number one is, can we elevate prices? So that takes us back to what's the customer willing to pay for? And if you can, that's the easiest fix, and do your analysis on that. The other one, which is totally within your control, is can you improve win rates? So does your effectiveness go up? So if your win rate is 20%, can it go to 30%? If it's 30%, can it go to 40%? As a result of all the specialization that you have, how much more effective does it make you? And if you can't answer that question, then you got to be honest with yourself and look at yourself in the mirror and say, geez, maybe we're specializing just for the sake of specializing. Maybe we'd be better off with a more generalist model. But if you can't answer the question, then you know you're onto something, and pursue that line of thinking in terms of that area of specialization. All right, we're going to take one more break. Before we jump to that, I want to make you guys aware of something. We just came out with a new app and a new website that allows you to create an account and personalize your experience with us. You can select how often you want to receive our content, in what format. Do you want print, digital, text, audio, video, you name it. And most importantly, what topic. You can customize your experience with us based on the topic of interest. If this is interesting to you, go to Apple's App Store and download the SBI app. Or you can go to our website, which is salesbenchmarkindex.com/register, and create an account. Okay, we'll be right back after the break. This is the SBI Podcast. You are watching SBI TV. This is a monthly web TV show featuring guests just like you, executives trying to grow their revenues. Each month, you can peek behind the scenes and watch your peers discuss their strategies for how they make their numbers. You are not going to want to miss this. Okay, this is our last segment with Dave Longaker on the topic of sales organizational design. I'm Greg Alexander, and let's jump back into the questions. I really have kind of one big macro question in this segment because the first two segments were so rich, and that is this issue of transition. So how do I go from the current org model to the new org model without committing the two unforgivable sins when you implement a new org structure? And those two unforgivable sins are, you can't lose any customers in the process. That would be a travesty. And the second one is, you can't lose any A players in the process as well. When you shake up the org chart, you're messing with your team's livelihood. Territories get changed, account relationships could get changed, et cetera, and there is a shortage of superstar sales talent, and I'd hate to see you push some of them out the door just because you implemented a new org model. So transitioning from the old to the new is really, really, really tricky. So Dave, you went from this siloed sales model to this unified sales model, which sounds like a big shift. So how did you manage the transition?
So it's a great question, and it's it's an area that we're still managing through. To be honest with you, I think the transition is not something that you can expect to or could ever achieve overnight or get right in your early days of implementing it.
It's
I think
hard.
what we've chosen to do, for all the reasons that you mentioned, the importance of not disrupting our customer relationships or creating any situations where we're losing top talent or taking our eye off the ball of keeping our customers happy. You have to strike the right balance of moving quickly and moving carefully, and that is a difficult balance. But as I mentioned earlier, I think that you have to start with getting the right leaders into your critical roles to help manage the transformation and the transition within the first level of your organization. And for us, that's the geographical splits. Second thing is, of course, figure out how to make best use of the existing top talent you have that knows your company, that knows your products, and hopefully knows your customer base pretty well. And then as we look to bring in new talent, typically what I'll find is if we do this collaboratively especially with the top talent on the team, everyone wants to be part of a winning team. And as they see new talent join the team that they can see raises the level of the company, raises our level of engagement with customers, increases our business, increases our pipeline and our opportunities, increases customer satisfaction. Real top talent in sales thrives in that environment. I think they want to be part of a winning team. They want to be part of a winning company, and and that puts them in better position to win more business. So, again, my approach to this has been to get our key sales leaders, of course, and then our key top talent on board and aware of what we're planning and why. And in some cases give them a chance to weigh in on and influence some of the decisions that we're making about how to structure things as we evolve and as we bring in new talent. And for me, of course, you don't get it 100% right, but that's helped to minimize any disruption as we've gone through the transformation. And I've been pretty happy with our ability to retain top talent and bring in new top talent, and through that, build even stronger chemistry on a team that can see they're surrounded by peers who are committed to helping the company achieve its goals and transformation, and that can mean success for everybody.
Yep.
So you do that, you get everybody in the same boat, rowing in the same direction, and I think it minimizes the risk in that kind of transformation.
Yep. So, fantastic example of change management, strong leadership that is inclusive and that over-communicates the why. The why is so important. When you just tell somebody we're going to do X, Y, Z, and you don't take the time to explain why we're doing it, and you don't take the time to get their opinion on it, be inclusive, and then explain to them, how you reached the conclusions that you reached, then people are in the dark. That's ineffective communication. They start answering the why question on their own, which very often they answer incorrectly. They leap to their own conclusions, and unfortunately, maybe they walk out the door because they don't agree with what you're doing. That's a travesty, and you can't have that happen. Just over-communicate, get people's input, answer the why, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, and I'll mention one more thing. Having been around a number of companies that went through some pretty substantial transformations as they were trying to address new market segments or evolving their product set or both. My experience is that transformation always creates opportunity for your best talent, and people enjoy that. We're a company that has been through, as I mentioned, a lot of acquisition, a lot of launch of new products, some organizational transformation, and I think to a great extent our best talent has seen that as opportunity for continued development, continued expansion or change of their role or areas of focus as they have ambition to do that. And again, I think in some ways it can create a great environment of retention for people, knowing that as you're evolving, there'll be opportunity for them to try new things or expand what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. It is a great opportunity for A talent, and A talent always recognizes the opportunity, and sometimes they're the early adopters and the cheerleaders, the people that embrace the change first. All right, Dave, unfortunately, we're at our time window here. On behalf of our audience, I wanted to thank you for making a contribution to our field. This is a big topic, and the more people like yourself that can weigh in on it and give their opinions on it, the smarter we'll all become. So appreciate you being on the show today.
Well, thanks for having me. I enjoyed the discussion.
Okay, great. All right, I want to thank the SBI audience as well for tuning in. You've made this show very popular. Because of the popularity, we're able to get guests like Dave. So let's keep this snowball moving down the hill. Keep tuning in, keep listening, keep the download numbers up, and keep all the positive comments coming. I really appreciate it. If you want to learn more about this particular subject, sales organizational design, plus all the other emerging best practices that top leaders like Dave are deploying to make their numbers, again, hit our website, salesbenchmarkindex.com/register, create an account, tell us what you're interested in, and we'll be sure to do our best to get you some valuable information. But until next time, as always, I wish you the best of luck as you try and make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on SBI services, case studies, the SBI team and how we work, or to subscribe to our other offerings, please visit us at salesbenchmarkindex.com.